Hello, my name is Christopher Lloyd, or you can just call me Chris. I am the founder and the CEO of What on Earth Books in the UK, and this is my home. And I thought this evening, to introduce you to our world of books, we could just spend a few minutes having a chat around the log fire. Over the next few minutes, I thought I would spend a little time just explaining a bit about myself and the background of the company, and about our publishing philosophy, and then show you our backlist of titles, those that we've published over the last 2 years in the UK and the US, and then look forward to the spring and the fall, to the books we're bringing to the market. But first of all, let me just say what a pleasure and a privilege it is for us to have you at Walker Books represent us in Australia. We are incredibly excited and very honoured. So to start with, just a little bit of background about myself. I studied history at Cambridge, and then I went on to become a journalist on the Sunday Times newspaper in London, which I did for about 10 years. And I was then headhunted, I suppose, is the right phrase, to run an education publishing company in Oxford. And I did that for 5 years as CEO, after which time I started writing books. And the reason I started to write books is rather important and goes to the heart of the whole philosophy of What on Earth Publishing. Now, as you'll see from this picture here, I am very fortunate to have 2 daughters and 1 wife. You can't see Mrs. Lloyd in the picture, as it happens, but this is Matilda, my elder daughter, and this is Verity, my younger daughter. And I think this picture was taken when they were about 7 and 5. They're now 23 and 21, and goodness only knows how that happened. Anyway, the story is that when Matilda was 7, she was a precocious, young, lively girl who loved reading and loved life. And then she changed from her school from one year group into another year group. And she changed teacher. And within a few weeks' time, her whole outlook on life changed dramatically. She stopped reading, she became moody and argumentative, she didn't want to get up in the morning, she didn't want to put her clothes on, and she certainly didn't want to go to school. And of course the people who were to blame for the whole of this were us, her parents, because we were the ones sending her to school. So we went to the teacher and we tried to find out why Matilda didn't want us to go to school anymore. And the problem actually became quite clear quite quickly. The teacher was doing what teachers are supposed to do. She was teaching to the test to try and make sure the children would pass their literacy and their maths at the age of 8. And she was dividing the class up into those who needed her help so she could get more through the test successfully, and those who didn't need her help, who were being given, as it happens, mind-numbingly boring worksheets to do just to keep them quiet. So for Matilda, there was nothing to stimulate her curiosity. She was going to school, and she was suffering from a brain disease. It's called boredom. Boredom, just so you know, is early onset depression. It is an unnatural state of the brain. The brain wants to find out all sorts of things. That's its natural state. And when it finds out new things, it makes connections, and you get a shot of joy, a chemical called dopamine that rushes through your cortex and makes life worth living. But Matilda was having none of that because she was bored. There was nothing at school of interest to her. So we, her parents, decided we had to take her out of school, try and find another school. And we couldn't find another school. So what do you do? So to cut an already long story just a little bit shorter, we decided in the end to home educate just for a year whilst we found the right school for Matilda. So Matilda and Verity, Chris and Virginia create a schoolroom at home. And we think, in our naivety, that we can accomplish in 2 months what it would take 2 years for you to do in a school. How amazing is this going to be? We got lots of books, and we got a timetable and a curriculum, and we got people to come in and help. We had a clock, and we even had a bell, so that we could create the ultimate learning experience at home. But there was one thing we thought was very important, is that after 2 months, that we would set a little tripwire, and we would ask Matilda, how is this experience for you? How much better is this than being at school? Now, I can honestly say that those 2 months were the worst 2 months in our whole lives. In fact, the Lloyd household resembled the last scene of a play by William Shakespeare called Hamlet. The house was literally littered with dead bodies. And in our desperation, something happened that changed everything. We sat down with Matilda and we said, just tell us, what are you interested in? And it's amazing to me, as I look back now over all those years, that we'd never bothered to ask. We adults spend all our time telling children what we think they need to know. We never turn around and say, what are you interested in? Thankfully, Matilda told us she was interested in penguins. So we went to London Zoo, where they have terrific penguins, and we had the best day we'd had for months. Visiting the penguins, she was just enthralled. Feeding the penguins, it was amazing. And then she wants to do a project about penguins, which live, by the way, in Antarctica. And she discovers that Antarctica used to be on the equator 250 million years ago, and it's moved like a giant jigsaw puzzle piece with all the other continents in something called plate tectonics. Now it's on the South Pole, where it's really cold, and the penguins can't keep warm, and they have to huddle together. And then we imagine there's a big group here and a little group here, and one penguin leaves the big group and goes to the little group, and how many penguins are left, and what's the ratio, and what's the percentage, and she's doing maths now in penguins, and she says to me, Dad, why did the penguin leave the big group and go to the little group? And I think to myself, well, what does it matter? We're doing maths. But she wasn't doing maths. She was doing penguins. So I said, well, maybe it was bullied, or maybe it saw another penguin in distress. I don't know. And then before I knew it, she'd gone up to her room and she was writing a story about why the penguin left the big group and went to the little group. And then she wanted to find out about ice. And when you heat it up, it turns to water. And when you heat it up, it turns to steam. And we're doing our changing states of matter and measuring the temperatures. This is science. And then she wants to find about stories to do with ice in history. And we learn about this ship that left Southampton in 1912, and they said it would never sink. And we explore the idea of arrogance. And they said it would never sink, so they didn't need to put enough lifeboats on board. I'm sure you know the ship I mean, the Titanic. And on its maiden voyage, it collides with an iceberg, and that's the connection. And it sinks, and 1,529 people lose their lives. And then she wants to dance like a penguin, and she wants to write poems about penguins. And what I discover is that everything that young child, all the life skills, from geology to maths to science to history to dancing to poetry, can all be learned through penguins. But of course, it's not just penguins. Children can learn the skills they need through anything. All we have to do is to connect knowledge together. So this is why What on Earth Books is about trying to see things from different perspectives. It's about trying to create empathy. It's about trying to make connections between things, just in the way that when a brain finds a connection, it starts to laugh. That's how humor works. Or it starts to experience a sense of joy, because two apparently unrelated things connect together into a story or a narrative. That's what we're passionate about. And with your help, I hope we can share that passion with many, many people in Australia. The real world is far more amazing than anything you can make up. That's what we believe. And that amazement comes through connecting things together into stories. So I started looking for ways of connecting knowledge together. And I ended up writing a book that will go all the way from the beginning of time, 13.8 billion years ago, to the present day in a single volume. It's called What on Earth Happened? And I wrote it, and it was published by Bloomsbury in 2007, and went on to sell 500,000 copies around the world in 15 languages. So I kind of hit the jackpot, and how lucky was I? And it was from the proceeds of that success that I set up What on Earth Publishing with a great friend and colleague, Andy Forshaw, who was the illustrator who worked on What on Earth Happened. And we set the business up in 2010. And we set it up with a specific reason to try and help create resources and narratives in print that would connect knowledge back together again, and that would allow people to see things from different points of view. What on earth? Which means that now, at long last, I can introduce you to some of our books. And the first series we put together are what are called wall books. They're timelines. We wanted to try and find a way for young people to see giant big stories that would connect things together, but without having to read a huge fat book. And of course, long stories need long books. So this idea of a wall book was a book you can read like a book, but you can also spread it out on the floor or hang it on the wall. This goes through 1,000 moments from the beginning of time, the Big Bang in space, all the way through natural history, up to the emergence of ancient civilizations in different parts of the world, in the Far East, in the Middle East, in Europe, in America over here, all the way through to sub-Saharan Africa and Australia. And you can see, as you pull out the pages, 1,000 moments occurring in more than 13.8 billion years. And this book is fabulous for making connections. If you take a year like 1520, when on the throne of England is this man here who had 6 wives, his name's Henry VIII. And at the same time he's on the throne, can you see what they're building in China? It's the Great Wall of China. And Columbus has just discovered the Americas. And the Incas are living in Machu Picchu, and they're living in Great Zimbabwe in Africa, and Copernicus, nicknamed Copernicus, has discovered that the Earth goes round the sun. And so our timeline that goes all the way from the Big Bang goes right up to the present day, where you can see here a rather not so savoury looking Donald Trump and a very disgruntled David Cameron, who's just lost the vote for Brexit. After the timeline, about 30 of the key moments are written up as newspaper stories. In a simple way, as if each story happened the day before, just like it would be if you were reading a real newspaper. Non-fiction comes alive when it's written about as if it happened yesterday, including the drama and the emotion and the excitement of reality, which can be lost in a historical textbook. So, providing an overview of all history, from nature to the Stone Ages, to ancient history to the present day, using this type of narrative device of a timeline and a newspaper with a quiz at the back. 50 questions, all the answers can be found on the timeline, and even adults can enjoy this book because right at the front we put a little pocket magnifying glass, so it doesn't matter how your eyesight has degraded over the years. Everybody aged 6 to 106 can enjoy a wall book. Now, the What on Earth Wall Book of Big History was the first title that Andy and I produced under the name of What on Earth Books in 2010. Since then, we've created a whole range of timeline wall books to tell big stories, often partnering with very august institutions like the Natural History Museum. This one goes through the story of life, from a bacteria to a human being, 4 billion years, in 1,000 different species, with newspaper articles about the scientists who have discovered the story of life on Earth from Aristotle all the way to the present day. And we've done the story of sport, from 776 BC in the ancient Olympics right up to the modern Olympic movement today. Or then there's the story of science and engineering, which we partnered with the Science Museum here in London, that tells the story of inventions from fire and spears and bows and arrows all the way through to supersonic cars. Or the complete plays of Shakespeare, where you can see not just 1 or 2 plays, but all the plays of Shakespeare being performed on a stage, the Globe Theatre, all 38 of them, on a timeline, so then you can spot the ghosts, or see which ones have poison in them, which ones have happy endings or sad endings, and which ones are based on true stories and which ones are made up. It's only by seeing the big picture that you can then follow your interests and trace the narratives through these extraordinary moments. Finally, we have one with the National Trust here on the history of Britain, from Stonehenge to Brexit. Now, these wall books make fantastic gifts for anyone, really, aged 6 upwards. And we found great success by combining them into gift sets. So we have a gift set of 3 titles here, which is Science, History and Nature, in a beautiful gift box you can see here. And we also have a gift set of all 6 titles, which is really weighs a ton. But it's actually a fantastic opportunity for kids to have a whole spectrum of knowledge presented to them in the format of timelines and newspapers, all the way, from history and nature and science and sport and Shakespeare. Now, for every wall book I've shown you, we've also developed a What on Earth timeline sticker book. So you will see there are 6 here in the collection. And the sticker books work on a similar idea of using a timeline. Here, if I choose the nature one, you can see. But this time the timeline is simplified. There's only 100 moments as opposed to 1,000. And these 100 moments are all whited out on the timeline so that you can unfold it and children can make their own story of life on Earth, all the way from a bacteria to a human being, by choosing the stickers that are all in the back of the book and fixing them in the right places on the timeline. So here we have things that emerged in the sea, and then things that emerged on the land. And then we have a whole spread of dinosaurs, followed by mammals, followed by the ancestors of humans into the modern day. This way, children can learn as they have fun. Children can be creative. Children can show adults the things that they're most interested in. What are you interested in? And guess what? There's even a penguin inside here. Maybe you recall that the heart of the What on Earth philosophy is about connecting knowledge together, seeing things from different perspectives. Well, that first book I wrote for Bloomsbury, What on Earth Happened, was actually written as an adult book. Originally, I wanted to write it as a children's book. And last year, thanks to What on Earth Books, I was able to write and we were able to publish a children's version of that original book. And here it is. It's called Absolutely Everything. Now, Absolutely Everything takes readers on a giant 15-chapter journey through the history of time, from the beginning of time all the way through life on land, the dinosaurs, the ancient ancestors. Finally up to chapter 15, the most important of all, which is called To Be Continued, about all sorts of things that haven't yet played out, all sorts of things that maybe the young people in the world today need to try to fix to make the planet, life and people fit for the future. Now, one of the things I love doing, apart from just writing books, is to tell stories. And I think of myself really as a storyteller. So I go into schools, I go to museums, I go to festivals, I go all around the world, putting stories together about my books. And I use various different devices. I have a storytelling coat, and I invite children and adults to come and pick the pockets inside this coat to see what's inside. An everyday object in the pocket is linked in some way to one of the most amazing moments in the history of absolutely everything, or in the story of life on Earth, or science from the ancient times to the present day. Here is a little clip filmed by the BBC of the launch of Absolutely Everything in September last year, 2018, and it was filmed at the Royal Institution in the very lecture theatre where Michael Faraday first demonstrated the use of an electric motor.
Now, it's said that people who forget history are in danger of repeating past mistakes. Well, a historian from Kent is on a mission to ensure that we all know much more about our past, present and future.
I don't know how we're going to know about that. But anyway, Christopher Lloyd from Tunbridge's latest offering is called Absolutely Everything and tells the history of the world from the beginning of time to the present day. Ian Palmer has more.
This man wants to change the way we're taught.
Are you ready to set us off on our journey through the history of the world from the beginning of time to the present day? It's bell picking pocket number one. What have we got?
It's all about making connections.
A bottle of water.
His style appears to be engaging people aged between 9 and 99 all over the world.
I think it was lovely, and he has loads of energy, which is really nice for children, I think, and for adults as well.
I really like picking the pockets. That was my favourite bit, and I like the slideshow as well.
It's just so very interesting. It's just full of really useful information.
Christopher Lloyd is an historian. The award-winning author has written a book which tells the story of the world and how it's connected to, well, absolutely everything.
You are half dead, Bell. Look at that.
So how does his connected philosophy work?
For example, I will take a jar of olives, and I will explain how, for the ancient Greek people, the olive oil was so valuable that they could swap it for food and for something even more valuable, for slaves, so they didn't have to work in the fields. So that gave them all this spare time. So then they could go to the theatre, and they could watch people running around a racetrack in the first Olympics, and they could invent trial by jury because they had time to judge whether someone's innocent or guilty, or vote in elections. And suddenly, through a connection, a jar of olives in the kitchen cupboard, you find yourself being able to navigate these amazing narratives, but only if you connect.
The Cambridge graduate has published works on Shakespeare, the Magna Carta, science, sport and nature. His latest book brings those topics together. On a successful tour of China, he was asked to sign 2,000 books in one day.
He's got a mission that he's taken it on himself to teach the world, not in this case to sing, but to understand that if you don't know history, you don't know nothing.
There's no doubting Christopher Lloyd's passion. Those who know him love his message, and his message is spreading. Ian Palmer, BBC Southeast Today, at the Royal Institute in London.
Now, giving talks in the UK or in China or in the US is something I really enjoy to do, whether it's at schools or at museums or at festivals. If ever there's an opportunity for a similar lecture tour in Australia, then of course I'll be thrilled to discuss this, and it can be a very lucrative, productive book-selling opportunity. And if you'd like to see my whole talk delivered in 15 pockets from the beginning of time to the present day, then please just type in Christopher Lloyd, Absolutely Everything, into Google and go to YouTube, and you will find each pocket delivered as its own separate video, just to whet the appetite of any festival organisers or school librarians. By now, I hope you're beginning to see that What on Earth Books over the last 2 years has been expanding its proposition and its brand, not just to provide timeline books, but to also really search for this intersection between books that children really want to have, which Doreen Kindersley and National Geographic are traditionally very strong at, with the kind of gift books that adults love to give children, like Flying Eye and Wide-Eyed. And this is the intersection, books that children crave for, but which adults also want to give as gifts, which is where we at What on Earth believe our books are best positioned. And to that end, we produced a book back in September last year, which we believe really hits that intersection. It's called I Spy. And the idea is that this will give children a unique opportunity to see how animals, apart from humans, see the rest of the world. At the beginning of the book, there is a scene, you can see it here, with a horse in it and a house and some sky. This is how humans see the world. But as we leaf through the pages, you can see by lifting the flaps of different parts of the book how a monkey might see the same scene, or how a dog might also see the same scene, with completely different colours and different hues. And as we progress through the book, it's not just mammals like cats that we see how they see the world, or a squirrel, for example, or over here, a mouse, but you can also discover how horses and cows and birds see the world. Birds like an eagle with its amazingly sharp, all-rounded eagle eyes, or a woodcock, which has again a completely different way of seeing the world, which has one eye looking up and another eye looking down. You begin to see what an extraordinary world we live in, if only we start taking the perspective of different living things, of looking around the corner, of asking ourselves, what on earth? And now I would like to present to you in the last section of my little video introduction some of the really exciting books that we will be presenting to the market in the UK and the US, and with your help in Australia, over the next 12 months. This is the What on Earth Books front list. The first title I would like to show you is a beautiful and beautifully written reference book called Ocean, which covers a wide range of facts about our global ocean, including how it's being threatened and what we can do to help. The many infographics are just the icing on the cake. The remarkable thing to me is how the author, Sabina Weiss, manages to talk about huge environmental issues without being depressing. She always keeps the emphasis on celebrating the largest wonder of our world, which are the oceans surrounding our beautiful blue planet. Another one of our really fun spring books is called Monsters, and this is a magic lens hunt. Inside the book are information about 40 or 50 of the most amazing monsters in all the world, and what you have is a monster detector. Here, children can find out things adults don't know. It's another opportunity for that shot of joy by making connections to get triggered in the brain. Nose Knows, Wild Ways Animals Smell the World is a companion book to I Spy, the second in our Wild Ways series. It's a lift the flap book, like I Spy. But I have one sad bit of news for you. We weren't able to include scratch and sniff in Nose Knows, though actually once you've read about some of the smells, you'll probably thank me. Nose Knows introduces readers to how the sense of smell works, with scent molecules in the air being detected by olfactory organs and interpreted in our brains. And then it dives deep into the world of animal smell. Ants don't have noses, for example. They smell with their antennae. Polar bears can track smell so well that they can detect their prey through a thick layer of ice. While most birds have nostrils at the top of their beaks, near their heads, kiwis have them at the tip of their beaks, so they can smell for yummy bugs in the dirt. And my favourite, when opossums play dead, they release the smell of rotting flesh. That way, predators won't want to eat them. Originally, we thought I Spy would be primarily a retail title because of the flaps, and have been amazed to see the library world embrace it too. So we're crossing our fingers that this book, Nose Knows, will also cross markets. As I mentioned at the start, we do a lot of partnering with cultural organisations. Prehistoric, a title that we'll be publishing this summer, was developed with the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. It takes readers from the present backwards into deep time, stopping off at early humans, giant ice age mammals, all three dinosaur periods, and back to earlier creatures until we get to the first signs of life on Earth. The main story is of the amazing creatures who came before us, of course, but unlike most of its competitors, this book connects the dots to our world today. And a series of infographics give additional information on a wide range of related topics, including how fossils are made, how climate change works, the makeup of a flowering plant, the creation of coal, and even our modern crisis of plastic waste. You all know how kids feel about dinosaurs and their ilk, but this book is one for those whose enthusiasm has survived their preschool years and are excited to make connections across time into the present. We see this book as having legs in all markets, as we hope you do too. North America, a graphic fold-out history, is another partnership with the Smithsonian and the first of a brand new timeline series. We don't expect you'll have that much of a market for it in Australia, so I won't spend a lot of time, but nobody has ever published a book that covers the whole history of North America, for adults or children. Really, it turns out nobody thinks of themselves as North American. They're all Americans or Canadians or Mexicans, Jamaicans, Haitians, etc. So we're taking a leap and telling the full intertwined story. And in the true What on Earth philosophy, the idea is that you will find your story wherever you come from, but you won't be able to avoid seeing everybody else's alongside. Unseen Worlds. This is one of the most beautiful and also one of the coolest and maybe creepiest books I've ever laid eyes on. The illustrations use historical colour plate as their inspiration, and they've achieved an incredible richness of colour and line that brings to life a wide variety of microscopic environments. These cute and creepy little creatures live pretty much everywhere, it turns out. They are in every body of water, every bit of soil, every kitchen cupboard, everyone's bed, and even in the eyebrows of grown-ups, but not kids, apparently. But don't despair. They're mostly harmless or even helpful. Gatefolds on every spread allow these alien landscapes to have the whole width of the spread, with information on either side of the gatefold. This is a stunning book, a gift book with potential for crossover to the adult market. And last but hopefully not least is Humanimal. Now, time for a disclaimer. This is another one of my books, so I probably can't be all that objective about it. But it's really exciting, you must believe me. We humans have a tendency to see ourselves as special, as different from the rest of animals. Look at our cities, we say. Look at the way we care for one another, our ability to use tools, languages. We even put people on the moon. Surely we are better than those poor, dumb beasts who roam the rest of the earth. But in recent years, we've had to think again, as more and more of these special abilities have been turned out to be shared across the animal kingdom. And as I worked on this book, which we originally called Your Inner Animal, I became more and more convinced that we need a whole new word to handle this new idea. So I'm proposing that word, which is the title of the book, Humanimal. Human plus animal equals Humanimal. Chimps make tools, and so do lots of other animals, including crows in Tokyo, who actually use us as tools, cracking nuts by throwing them on the road in front of cars. Tool-making is Humanimal. Elephants and baboons grieve their dead, so grief must be Humanimal. Termites build cities, Humanimal. Honeybees give one another directions, Humanimal. Ravens roll down snowy hills just for fun, so play is Humanimal too. As one by one the attributes we thought set us apart fall, maybe it's time to stop trying to find what makes humans special and just embrace our shared humanimility. Maybe that's one too much of a tongue twister. So that's just about it, folks. Thank you so much for bearing with me on our journey through the whole world of What on Earth books. We are so excited to have you representing us in Australia. We're here anytime you want to talk to us, or if you have any ideas or feedback, please just pass it through Angela and we'll be right there on the end of the line. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Hope to see you one day down under. Thanks a lot. Bye.